Hi, Bob. Hi, Ed.
Good afternoon. I'll call the November 17th meeting of the Architectural Review meeting to order.
Sure.
November 16th. November 16th. That's getting correct.
Chair Hunter,
Present.
Vice Chair Tregenza,
Here.
Committee Member Bluth,
Here.
Committee Member Carter,
Here, I don't think Ed's mic is on.
I got it. My mistake. Good.
thank you. Committee Member Polly,
Here.
Committee Member Ostavar,
Here.
and Committee Member Schmidt is absent. Staff members present are Principal Planner Riveri, Senior Associate Planner Schmidt, Associate Planner Bugger, and myself, Recording Secretary Barrera.
All right. Thank you, Erica. And also, could you announce to the public how they can participate as well?
Sure. Members of the public are encouraged to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey. It's also streamed on Comcast Channel 25. If you would like to provide public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone, making sure to join in time to accommodate delays. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Today's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. Please turn off TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected, as background noise interferes with the broadcast. Public speakers will be called upon in order of hands raised. There is a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting. Please stay within that limit.
Thank you, Erica. To start with, I'll open the consent agenda and ask if any members of the committee have any questions or comments on the consent items.
I'll move approval.
All right, we have a motion from Zoe for approval of the consent.
I'll second.
And been seconded by Committee Member Bluth. Eric, will you conduct a roll call for us, please?
Sure. Chair Hunter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Tregenza,
Aye.
Committee Member Bluth,
Aye.
Committee Member Carter,
Aye.
Committee Member Ostavar.
Abstain, I was absent.
Okay. Committee Member Polly.
Aye.
Great. The minutes are approved with a vote of 4.
Thank you. Also, at this time, we'll open up for public comments on any items that are not on the agenda. Any members of the public present to speak on that? Anyone online?
There are no attendees online.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll close that and move on to the first public appearance item, which is to consider 601 Lighthouse Avenue for preliminary architectural review of the permit application ARP-22-0201 to allow commercial building conversion to mixed-use building with 5 residential units. Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Chris Schmidt. I'm Senior Associate Planner with the City of Monterey, and I've been working with the applicant on this project. So yes, this is a preliminary review of a commercial building conversion to a mixed-use building at 601 Lighthouse. The staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving preliminary architectural review, and there are conditions of approval as well. So just some background information. The site is in the new Monterey side of Monterey. It is on Lighthouse at the corner of Lighthouse Avenue and Hoffman Avenue, and it contains an existing building. This is an older building that has had a number of different uses in the past, but the applicant here is looking at doing switching from commercial to mixed use, 5 residential units and retail below. So here's just a little bit more background information. I just wanted to show what the kind of surrounding area is. So the Lighthouse Corridor is PCLH, which means the Lighthouse Specific Plan is the land use and development document. And so it's kind of a transition mixed use area between the multifamily and uphill single family neighborhoods into the commercial neighborhoods going down to Cannery Row. So you can see the subject site, again, it's at that corner there. And I also highlighted kind of all the different land uses. You'll see VAF, which also refers to Visitor Accommodation Facility. On the left-hand side, there's a hostel, and then there are a couple of hotels on the right-hand side there. So going into the project description, so I've already described its conversion from commercial to mixed use with 5 residential units. They're also proposing new interior parking. There is no on-site parking at this site. New roof access stair and elevators, and a new roof deck, and then a new ground level retail space. The existing space is much larger. It previously contained 2 retail spaces, and they would consolidate the 2 and have a much smaller space in the front to accommodate for that new underground parking area. So this project required approval by the Planning Commission. They applied for a use permit to exceed the 30 units per acre density. This is allowed by the general plan and the specific plan, and the Planning Commission had to make the specific findings of exceptional design, implementation of the specific plan, vision, and design objectives, and they approved that on October 25th. I mentioned there were 2 retail spaces at the Lighthouse frontage. There was also a theater above, and that's the location of where these new residential units would be constructed. It was a pretty big theater space with really high ceilings, and the applicant is proposing to construct an additional floor inside the building to make 2 level residential units. As I mentioned, that the existing retail space would be reduced in size to 1 space, and that would be able to accommodate new parking at the rear, interior to the building. There would also be waste and recycling storage spaces, bicycle parking, an elevator, and mechanical. There's a stairway as well, mechanical and electrical rooms. I already mentioned this. The vaulted theater area would be converted to 2 stories. And then they're also proposing to update the exterior fenestration with new windows, new doors, new entryways, and a new stair. It is worth noting the roof access, both the stair and the elevator do exceed the 35 height limit, but those types of features are allowed by the city code to do that. So just moving on to the existing building here, we see it. It's been vacant for quite a few years now, at least since the beginning of the pandemic. The Paper Wing Theater moved down to Cannery Row, and I think they're still actively doing shows. And then there were 2 clothing retail stores that were in those locations on the ground level. Adjacent to the property, you'll see is that's the Bulldog Pub, which has been also closed for a few years, but I think they're actually pretty close to completing a lot of their renovations. The interior is done. I think they're working on a plan to do on the back side of the building. They have some outdoor seating proposed. Here's the side of the building from the Hoffman Street Avenue frontage. And you can see there's the big opening there, the stair that walks up into the building, excuse me, was the access to the theater. That stair would essentially be removed, and a landing would be created inside the building, and a new stair that would go up to the floors above and roof would be built. And here we see the rear elevation and other side adjacent to the Bulldog Pub. So here are the proposed elevations. You'll note at the roof, you can see that in the foreground, that rooftop access. There's also new deck railing proposed. And then they're proposing to replace all of the windows with a like style that's compatible with the existing building style, as well as maintain a lot of the other exterior elements. And then at the ground floor, they're completely renovating that new storefront with two new openings. Here's that side elevation. So as I mentioned, that entryway uphill on the left-hand side would be redesigned. So there would be still have that open aesthetic, but they would have it be enclosed with glass doors and windows that I believe would require some sort of pass to get into the building for the residents, while still, again, maintaining that openness aesthetic. And then you can also see the stair access to the roof above. The stair is, I think, one of the primary reasons why the project requires ARC review, because of the increase in height, the increase in bulk and mass. Here are the rear elevations. There would be basically all new windows at the rear. And then a couple of 3D renderings. And photorealistic rendering to compare. So the key here, I think, is to just show a lot of those existing design elements would be maintained here. The new windows, of course, there are new windows at that third story. They're a little bit different than the existing. And that's in order to be compatible but different with the existing building style. I should note this building is on the city's historic survey list, as hasn't been designated, but it had been reviewed by a historian and required further review to determine whether it's eligible. And in the case of this project, they didn't prepare that review in the sense to remove it or designate the building, but they did have a historian look at this proposed design to confirm that it meets the Secretary of Interior standards. And then moving on to the floor plans. So on the left-hand side is Lighthouse Avenue, and on the top side is Hoffman. So you see that new storefront and that new parking area at the ground level. A new entry to the parking level would be created on the Hoffman elevation. And then we have, sure. And then we have a mix of 5 different units, a mix of sizes and number of bedrooms. Generally, they range from, the smallest one is about 1,500 square feet, and the largest, the ones in the middle are 1,600 to I think almost 1,800, and the largest is about 2,300. They all have, I believe, 3 bathrooms, and that's because that previous theater use under the water district's rules actually allows the site to have quite a few water credits. So they're utilizing those credits for the residential units. And here's that third floor. And the roof access and deck. And I just wanted to note here that the roof access rules in the city code that allow the projects to exceed the height limit are very specific. The roof access is supposed to be set back a certain distance from neighboring property lines. So they're allowed to be at basically street fronting lines, but there's a 25-foot, I believe it was 25-foot setback from shared property lines. So that's why they've cited it where it is. And it's also placed there to kind of be secondary to the front elevations of the building. And then I also wanted to note that the rooftop deck railings themselves are also set back from the edge of the buildings, I think anywhere from 11.5 to 12 feet, depending on which elevation you measure from. And this graphic shows what that where the project exceeds that height limit, and it's a very small amount for the roof elevator penthouse here. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's about 1.5 feet, I believe. What the project doesn't comply with is this portion of the deck railing here does exceed 35 feet, and that feature is not exempt from the height requirements. So staff's recommended a condition to the planning commission to have that portion removed, and that recommendation has been maintained with the staff recommendation today. So moving on to the findings for approval. First finding that the proposed siding, mass, form, and architectural style are appropriate. Staff made 3 of the 4 findings today, and with the last being required for final architectural review. But staff made this finding that the new changes would match the style of the existing building, and they're similar in scale, and that the roof access is compatible because it's sited uphill and it is secondary to the building's exterior. The next finding is that the views, privacy, and living environment are not unreasonably impaired. View impacts would really be limited for this project due to the location of neighboring development and topography of the surrounding area. Just adjacent to this building, west of the project site is an existing church building that is actually taller than the proposed roof access. And so there are a few single family neighborhood homes uphill that I think really can't see this project. There are, however, a few multifamily buildings that can see the project, and I only spoke with one resident who had no viewer privacy impact concerns. So staff was able to make this finding. As I mentioned, the roof deck is set back, which would limit privacy impacts, and the specific plan actually does allow and encourage roof decks as open space. So it is consistent with the plan's goals and guidelines. And moving to the city plans and guidelines. So the specific plan, general plan, the general plan and the specific plan were the main documents used for this review of this project, as well as the zoning ordinance. Staff found this project to be consistent. There is attachment 2 to your report is a more comprehensive review of all of the specific plan policies in reference to the proposal. And generally, staff made this finding because these alterations are mixed use in character, and they support the plan vision by creating high quality housing in a commercial and commercial development along the transit oriented corridor. So staff made those first 3 findings. The last finding requires a little bit more detail, and mainly they had not provided the lighting details, and there could be some additional comments on their plan for the finish and final color. So that would be required for final architectural review, but our code does allow preliminary and final. So we did move forward to bring the project to the RC for review of that new massing. So again, staff recommends approval. I am available for questions, and the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. Open up for questions for Chris from the committee members.
So Chris, did HPC review this project?
No, the city code does not require the HPC to review it. It just requires that the project be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So what we've required the applicant to do is have their historian prepare a report identifying why the changes are consistent and going through the standards and substantiating that claim. We had talked about this project has evolved. They made significant changes from their original design because our staff felt it was not consistent with the standards. And so I think that we've since with with the changes that they've made, found it to be consistent.
I guess maybe the presentation that will be provided by the applicant might cover this, but what's the use for the deck? Is it gonna be barbecuing or?
It's
Is there
for the
gonna-
resident, excuse me, it's for the residents. I mean, I think they could potentially put a barbecue up there. You know, no permanent one was proposed today, but yeah.
Zoe, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe not in our purview, but I do want to know what we think the cost of these units is gonna be for renting, just because that's a important element as we start building more infill housing in our city. And I'm so pleased to see that someone is building where there's already water credits. So that's awesome.
I don't know. I would refer to the applicant.
Patrick?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for your presentation. You mentioned on the railing, that one section where this Hoffman slopes down is above the height, and then you said something about something being removed. Are you removing the railing or removing the height requirements, or what was?
Yeah, so what I believe what the condition says specifically is that the portions of deck railing that are above 35 feet be removed. And so I had briefly talked with the applicant about what sort of alterations they could do. I mean, they had kind of mentioned the idea of lowering that portion of the deck and still meeting the height limit. I haven't seen that final design at this point.
So you would either like chop the deck off, so because you have to have code
Right.
height railing around the whole deck.
Right.
So that would just make the deck smaller.
Correct.
Okay, and you can't lower it, like sink it into the roof necessarily.
They had potentially mentioned that as an
Okay.
idea.
All right.
I'm not sure how much feasibility they've
Thank you.
looked into doing.
Any other questions from, I have a couple of quick ones. One is with concerning the comment that was submitted by a member of the public on this as far as the bar next door and the concern about noise issues that may emanate from there. Is that it may be a question for the applicant, but is that something thought of or developed or incorporated into this plan?
Yeah, you know, that was something we received just before the meeting. I think we can ask the applicant to address it. I you know, I don't know if they've had a chance to review it, so I'll go ahead and pull it up at this point.
Okay.
But generally, the neighbor commented that, you know, they own a bar next door, and they were just hoping that that the applicant would consider ensuring that any sort of new windows that would be built at the property would be adequately soundproof, so they don't have issues in the future. I mean, technically the sound issues are an issue for the bar themselves. So they're going to have to really consider how they can stay compatible with the surrounding neighborhood as well. But certainly something the applicant should be aware of.
And then another question while you're pulling that up that I have, part of the final review would be the color, patterns and the like materials. Is there also a question if there's going to be a retail space there? Is there going to be a signage application forthcoming on this as well, or is that?
Yeah, all signage in the city generally for commercial purposes require a sign permit. I don't think that they have any specific tenant in mind at this point.
Okay.
But I think, you know, the spaces that they've shown potentially would just require an administrative review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quick question around the parking. Is that right sized? Is there any possibility for reduction, or just how did we come to that number?
Yeah, so the parking, because there's no on-site parking, there's actually no parking requirement. So they went ahead and provided this parking voluntarily. Generally, we don't typically for public lots often consider things like tandem spaces, but for this type of project where they would be private and it would require, some sort of access that only the residents and the business owner would have, that we found that it was okay in this circumstance.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members? Okay. All right, if no other questions from the committee, invite the applicant if they care to make a statement or presentation. Okay, good afternoon. Please state your name and
Certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Barlow with Wald Runke and Dust Architects. I'm the design professional record for the project. And first off, want to thank staff and the Architectural Review Committee for making time, and nice to see some familiar faces on both sides of the dais here. So I'll try to hit a few of the points that got raised during commissioner comments, and I think the owner may be available to make a presentation as well. First off, in terms of the big picture vision of this project, basically is adaptive reuse. So we've got a old building on Lighthouse. It is old. We've got the reports that determine that it wasn't historic, but we are still making the improvements in accordance with Secretary of Interior standards to try to be as compatible with this old hulk of a concrete building we're working with. This building and a similar application came in front of the Planning Commission in the spring of 2020. And in that point, there were only 4 units envisioned the project. And what happened with that version is that the economics just weren't penciling out for the number of units versus the amount of improvements that need to be done to this building. Again, we're not changing any of the bulk or mass of the building, with the exception of, some of the pertinences like the elevator tower. So, but we are basically keeping the same window pattern. But in addition to that, to get the extra bedrooms in there, a whole new floor is basically being built inside that building. Right now, there's 2 floors. There's the retail slab on grade condition, and then there's basically the old theater floor. In order to get the additional bedrooms in there, we're actually adding a 3rd floor structure in there, which is, unfortunately extraordinarily expensive, but I think it's going to make for a beautiful project. That 3rd level is basically what created the addition of these windows, because they're needed for life safety purposes. You have a bed, the previous version kind of had a mezzanine level where people were kind of stuffed between roof trusses. In my mind, as an architect, that's not the safest configuration. So I'm fully pleased with the changes we've made in terms of both safety and aesthetics. The other thing I'd like to point out in terms of the letter that came in from the bar owner next door, the configuration of this building, we aren't adding any new windows on that property line, which is shared with the bar. The other happy coincidence is that's actually where we're going to have a light well, so there'll be a little bit of a buffer from noise being generated to the bar side to where it hits the units. We have, I am familiar with that. We have run into situations with living units above restaurants where urban noise comes in. But that is also part of the understanding of this project, is that this is an urban condition. The folks that are going to be living here will be, we're actually looking at this as a condo project, because again, it's an enormously expensive undertaking. So the parking, roof deck, all those things are amenities, but the idea is not that we'll have tons of people. The access will be limited to residents only for both the roof deck and the parking, which, really should make it more of an amenity rather than something that would be noticeable. And then the very last item I wanted to bring up is we did meet with the chief building official at the city of Monterey this morning about our favorite railings there. And she very clearly indicated that really a 42-inch guardrail is the standard for essentially life safety up on that upper level. So if the Architectural Review Committee would be willing to at least reconsider that particular condition, if a single 42-inch metal rail is in conflict with the 35-foot height limit, I'd see it as something that's necessary, just like the egress windows. And with that, I will conclude my part of the presentation, and I'd like to invite the owner up as well. Unless there's
Thank
any
you.
questions.
Unless any of the committee members have questions for the applicant? No? All right, thank you very much for the presentation. The owner'd like to make a comment?
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Ethan Hare. I'm a local, born and raised builder, son of two school teachers here that taught in Monterey School District and Pacific Grove. In fact, as a kid, I grew up in the church next door to this site, sitting on the concrete wall, looking at this building, wondering what the heck goes on in there. So we're very excited about the project. It was encouraging to receive unanimous approval, and multiple commissioners from the Planning Commission say, thank you for developing this project. We love your project. This should be a poster child, and we'd like to see more of them, which has been great. We have had some setbacks on timing. We understand that comes with the business, and also discouragement by homeless break-ins that have vandalized the buildings, set up camps, use the bathroom everywhere except for the actual operating bathroom. So we're very eager to move this forward. Couple of points just to respond to questions. This building is potentially historic. It is not designated as historic. We actually retrained multiple historians who each and every one of them recommended that we go through the process to remove this as a potentially historic resource. Frankly, to be open-hearted, we don't have the time and brain space to go through that process, and really it wasn't necessary for our concept. We were able to thread the needle really with an eye to the Secretary of Interior standards and deliver what we believe is a beautiful project. You will see items in the design, such as the differentiation from the third and second floor windows. We did require the 3 lights on that third level simply for egress and safety requirements. Speaking to the bar and noise concerns, we've designed these units as efficiently as possible. One of the things that Mr. Barlow mentioned, below where we have the light wall inside the building is actually a hallway. So there will be quite a bit of space from the exterior wall that is shared with the bar to the hallway before we even get to the inside the residences. Not to mention the exterior of the building is all cast in place concrete from, I think, approximately 1941. So we have some great sound buffers there. And the entire neighborhood is full of apartments and other residents that will either be impacted or not by the bar and its activities. The use of the roof deck, that's for the residents only, in order to go and enjoy the space and the fresh air and the beautiful sweeping views of our Monterey Bay, Cannery Row. That's where residents will be able to enjoy and get some sunshine, which is important to us both from a valuation standpoint and as we are here in the time of COVID, open and outdoor spaces is really, really important. The guardrails, we've very mindfully set the edge of the deck back, well, for safety concerns, constructability, cost, and also sightlines. After we set up all our netting and story poles, we went and carefully walked the neighborhood and the various opposing street corners, and you could see none of the guardrails at all. Our very direct request would be to keep the guardrails as we've proposed, so that our residents could have more safe space to enjoy the outdoors and the beautiful views. Cost of the units, these will not be for rent. It is our intention to sell the units and make them available. Unfortunately, the prior project was formatted as rentals, and due to cost and timing and going through our approval process, does not support rentals, whether they be market or affordable. Timing is important to us. We've invested a lot of care and worked with local talented architects such as Mr. Barlow and our team to put together what you have today. I think Mr. Schmidt here has a short video that we've rendered. If you would share another minute and a half of your time to see what we've proposed. Included in this video rendering is a view that wraps around the building, a daytime rendering, a solar study, and then a very brief nighttime rendering as well to demonstrate some of the proposed lighting. Please. So wrapping around the building, this is where we anticipate having the entrance to our parking. The parking will be for the residents only. We have some down lighting that'll be shielded in these recessed panels that are there accenting the existing building. We do plan to have potentially have a mural on the outside, on the Hoffman side there, as well as potential graphics in our lobby. That's also something we've been collaborating with our historian on. There you can see the bulldog to the right. There's no openings in the wall that is shared on the property line between the bulldog and our building. Like I said, we're very eager to move forward. We're open to questions and would like to proceed.
All right, thank you for your presentation. Committee members, any questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Do you have a problem with making the deck a little bit smaller to get around that 35 height requirement thing?
We would prefer not to, especially given that we have 5 residences there. The amount of space that we think will be comfortable once furnished for each of the families that would enjoy the spaces to be there and rather than that way more than one resident could be up there at a time.
Do you know approximately how many square feet you would be losing?
I don't. I would right now we've kept it at 2,000 square feet also for safety and accessibility concerns. If we were to reduce it as proposed, I would estimate we would lose approximately 25%.
Okay, so about a quarter of the space would be,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
So you'll just use the deck as a common area?
Correct.
Are you going to furnish it so residents can then just make their way up, enjoy the views for the day?
Hot tubs, pool.
No hot tub or pool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the performa and the structure can't support that. Yes, that would really enjoy the view, enjoy the day. We've kept it pretty minimal, but when we went up on the roof as it is, it's just so incredible. It's worth the investment to bring that stairwell up and the elevator for the residents.
So largely movable furniture, movable planters, things like this.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
One more question or comment. We had a similar roof deck come before us a couple months ago, and the idea of like string lights came up because they're very popular now. So you've got a railing height limit, but then it's like, oh, and then they, 8 feet up, they put poles and they ran
Right.
string lights around the whole thing. So that would probably be something we would want to make sure didn't happen. And I don't know if that's a city, reg or not, but something to think about. Yeah, any plans for that?
No plans.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation and answering questions. Next, I'd like to open up this section or this item for comments from the public. Erica, would you tell public how they can participate and make comments?
Sure. Once again, to join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Today's webinar ID is 161-914-9563. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name they've typed into Zoom, and there is a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting.
All right, thank you, Erica. If no one is online at this time, open up for public comments for any members of the public in the chamber today. No. All right, if there are no comments from the public there, I'll close public comments and open up for discussion, comments from the committee members.
Well, I think it's a great idea. It's going to get us closer to some of the housing requirements the state is requiring. And it looks like a wonderful reutilization of an existing structure in the downtown area. So I hope more projects like this come in front of us that we can approve.
Yeah, I'll chime in as well. I actually like the project. I like the simplicity of it. I think in an urban environment, that sort of benign box of a building that sort of provides an edge to the street is the appropriate solution. The detailing of it is simple. It's not a pretentious building. I think it's actually just a good project. I would make 2 comments. If a motion is made that I believe we can attach a condition that says nothing is to be placed on that deck, no furniture, trellises, planters, or anything like that rises above the level of the guardrail. Because there is the danger that they might start putting umbrellas or heating lamps or something like that up there, and I think that's when those spaces really start to become eyesores. So attaching that condition to the project would be important. I personally have no problem with the guardrail and the size of the deck and what's going on up there. I think you see from the rendering and the manner in which it's set back from the elevations. A 42-inch guardrail is up there. I think it's pretty. I don't think you're going to see it from the level of the street. You'd have to be pretty far away from the building to even perceive that thing. So I think we should just go ahead and give them the deck, but I would attach that condition to it that nothing be placed on that deck that is taller than the guardrail. And, also attach a condition to ensure that we don't have lighting placed up there, because I think that's important as well. That's all I've got.
Yeah, very similar thoughts. I think this is exciting to finally see more projects like this add to the vibrancy and vitality of Lighthouse, which really needs it. It needs more kind of people and updated businesses. So, and reutilizing an existing building is fantastic. I had some initial kind of worries about the sort of blankness of the Hoffman human scaled side at the sort of base of the structure, but I was pleased to hear that it sounds like perhaps there's murals or something to activate that a little more. I did have one question that perhaps the applicant can respond to, just if they were planning on being the company or operating, the operators of the building will be maintaining it after sale. But otherwise, I'll just echo comments of others. Justin's comments, I think, are really valid. I think they will need lighting up there, but I think it's just elevated, anything elevated above the guardrail that would be a concern.
All right, I'll just add my comments. I think Justin's comments are spot on. I think this is a great project for utilization of a building that's been sitting there empty for a while. And, you know, given the considerations or conditions that, as Justin mentioned them, I think that makes for an excellent project. All right, if there are no other comments on that, I'll entertain a motion on this preliminary architectural review on this project.
I'll move to approve 601 Lighthouse Avenue preliminary architectural review permit application ARP -22-0201 to allow a commercial building conversion to a mixed-use building with 5 residential units, and the condition that no permanent addition can be installed on the roof deck that's above the height of the railing. Does that make sense?
42-inch guardrail.
32-inch guardrail.
Yeah. I'll second the motion.
All right, the motion has been put forth by committee member Tregenza and seconded by committee member Pauly. Erica, would you conduct a roll call vote for us, please?
Sure. Chair Hunter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Tregenza,
Aye.
Committee Member Bluth,
Aye.
Committee Member Carter,
Aye.
Committee Member Ostovar,
Aye.
and Committee Member Polly.
Aye.
Okay, that motion is approved with a vote of 6. The decision is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 days. We have applications online or in our planning office.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for your presentations and good luck continuing the project. Thank you. Okay.
Everyone, I'm going to have to apologize. I have to hustle out and pick up a kid. So I'm going to miss this last part of the meeting where we go over to the checklist.
All right, thanks, Justin. Okay. All right, with that done, the next item on the public appearance item is consider updates to the architectural review submittal checklist as a public handout. And staff have the presentation and discussion on this for us.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Buggart. I am an associate planner with the City of Monterey's Planning Division, and today we're going to talk about updates to the architectural review submittal checklist. Sharing. The recommendation from staff is that ARC adopt the proposed amendments to the architectural review submittal checklist. As previously gone over at other meetings, the Architectural Review Committee has the special power and duty to review and oversee the minimum submittal requirements for any architectural review application. The handout includes those submittal requirements for architectural review related applications, and the handout was last updated about 6 years ago. And additionally, this item has been brought before the ARC and most recently on September 7th, 2022. The recommendations from that meeting and the comment letter that was associated with that meeting have generally been incorporated into today's version that was attached to the agenda report. Accessing the architectural review handout is on the city's planning webpage. If you click on how to apply for a planning permit and go down to planning permit applications, if you're looking for an architectural review application and you click on this file, this is the submittal checklist that you'll see. Also, when somebody applies for an architectural review permit, this is the PDF or the link that we provide to applicants. A general overview, one of the items that was requested is that the applicant include the checklist itself as part of the application. And we've included a line for them to put what sheet number it might be on so that we can reference between the submittal checklist and their submitted application. Going to go into a little bit more detail line by line of the changes because I know there's been the previous time it was a little unclear. So overall, we wanted to update this form to reflect the modern approach to submittals, which instead of providing paper applications and paper plans, that everything is submitted electronically and all of these procedures and application materials are provided online. It was also discussed last time that this checklist is quite comprehensive, and if there are items that are not necessary on the checklist, there's a footnote on here that says, at the discretion of the community development director, submittal of any checklist items may be waived if the project can be sufficiently described and considered without such information. Gives a little bit of wiggle room for if you're only doing an addition that doesn't touch the roof line, bad example, but if you're doing a porch and you're not touching additions, that you're not submitting roof line adjustments and things that may not be applicable to your project.
Can you go back? So I just want to get.
Yes.
So when you've got a strike through, that means that's coming off?
Yes, so
That's on now. but
correct.
Coming off. Then what's the difference between the blue and the red colors?
It was brought before the commission once, and then it was brought before the commission again. And so each time there were some updates that
Blue
were,
is the first, red is the second, or?
I'm not remembering exactly where things happen. I'm sorry. Ultimately, it's the strike through and underline is anything that strike through was on the original checklist, and anything that's underlined is being added.
Okay, but, so strike through is, it's still gonna be on. It's
No.
not, it's coming off.
It,
So
It's
if
coming
it's
up.
underlined, it's still,
It's still gonna be, okay.
or
Well,
will be.
okay, got it. Well,
Hopefully.
right, so we're striking it out and then putting in that new text. I included this version just so we could see what used to be there for reference. There is a clean version attached to the resolution that doesn't have any of this, and the public would just be getting a clean checklist. The general information that's requested, not much was changed. We still need their name and parcel information. The only thing that was removed were the paper plan set sizes. On the site plan adjustments, one of the items that was requested in Justin Pauly's comment letter was to include property line measurements between the structure itself and the property line. It hadn't been explicitly asked for. We've asked for it in the past, but now that it's on here, it's mandatory. Another item that was requested was that we indicate that the applicant indicate the drip lines for trees. Sometimes they'll show where the trunk is and you won't know where it falls and how big it is really. Additionally, the survey item was updated, asking for a topographic survey for every project that's within 3 feet of a required front, rear, or side yard setback can be cost prohibitive, especially if the property itself is flat. So general survey can suffice in many cases, and we can still ask for it. And it's included further below and relating it to spot elevations at property corners so that we get the slope contours depending on if you're in New Monterey or maybe one of the flatter areas. Another item that was asked for is on the floor plans themselves that we asked them to shade walls and areas to be added and dashed areas to be removed. So we have some visual distinction between the two. Also, that the linear length of any of those walls that would be demolished are included. The city's definition for demolition is important because when you start to remove over 50% of the walls, we need that measurement, and it's helpful for them to include those lengths on there so we can compare it to the definition. Also, we included a clarification on the finished floor elevations that it's in comparison to the topographic survey if that survey was required. Various elevations have been provided and we'd like to make it consistent. A similar thing was done for the elevations themselves instead of the floor plans. that they clearly identify, I guess I was skipping to the second part of there, the finish grade at each corner, rafter edges, that it would be in comparison to the topographic survey if that survey was required. The first item there that's added is adding some sometimes pieces that are being removed, especially on potentially historic properties. They aren't always shown clearly that this little piece is coming off, this little piece is being added as an architectural feature, and it's not necessarily that they're removing a wall or a window, but we want to be clear that we can ask for all those little odds and ends. Stormwater facilities, there was no update done to that other than updating a working website link. The more important part is on that engineer verification letter on the second half. Originally, we were talking about if a project was proposing a new second or third story addition over an existing 1 or 2 story building. Now we're asking for any addition or alteration, whether it be an added roof that may be heavier. We need that engineer verification letter to say, hey, yes, this 100-year-old property can survive getting this new iron roof or whatever that. Trying to make it all encompassing instead of in certain situations. Additionally, in the last part of that, we used to say just the second story, and now we're talking about any additions or alterations. We have more than just 2-story buildings in the city. The only adjustment that was made to the final architectural review items were asking for them to indicate where on the plan set this information might be. Yeah.
Explain that. What's the there's just a underlined blank.
Right. So in the underlined blank, I didn't get the screenshot of that part, but there's a part where it asks for indicate the page number in the blank, which is in attachment 3.
Is there a link to the page, or is it a hyperlink, or?
No. So when somebody submits plans and it's on sheet A.2, they can put in A.2 in here. Yeah. So ultimately, with those updates, the recommendation from city staff is that ARC adopt these proposed amendments to the architectural review submittal checklist. With that, that concludes staff's presentation. But
Thank you, Matthew. Good presentation on that. Open up for comments from the committee members. Or questions for Matthew?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, whoever that was.
That was me. I'll just say generally, I really appreciate these modifications and efforts. I think it's going to be really helpful for applicants as well as the ARC and everyone else just involved. It seems like good communication. So really appreciate the effort to do these updates. I did see on the last one there a number of, I think it was only the front yards. I would say that should be modified to probably front and side. So anything attached to if it's a street, I guess it's more street frontage. It says front yard, but that can be interpreted if there's a corner lot in different ways. So that one comment there, and then also perhaps just for clarification, I've heard many times that fences are not required to have a permit, which is slightly shocking to me, but in this case, I see it's listed in there as required for review on the ARC. I'm assuming that's with any of these street frontage views, that the others are not, but for the street frontage views, fences are required to be shown for review.
I can chime in. So it's true that for single family home fences, we don't review them as long as they meet the height requirement. But for commercial properties, we do review fences because they, in the downtown specific plan, for example, commercial property fences might be slightly taller and they might have bigger impacts. So that's why we review those and not the single family residential fences.
Okay, but there are height requirements.
There are.
Okay, but then how do you, I guess you would only notice those if a complaint came up because they're not being permitted.
Right.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have one, it kind of came up from a question on the project today, and we've had a question on it on another one. Is it, if something is on the reconnaissance survey for the historic preservation as being possibly historic, even though it hasn't gone through the full process for designation as historically significant, is there or I guess my question is, should we include it on this checklist for stuff coming to the ARC that, you know, is this historic, or is this on the historic survey or reconnaissance survey or not? And if it is it something that should be referred to the HPC or not? Or is that outside of our purview, or is that something that we ought to consider on this?
So properties that are not designated historic nor proposed to be designated historic, they are not referred to ARC unless the proposed changes would be potentially inconsistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So in order to determine the Secretary of Interior standards for the preservation of historic buildings, structures. So that is why for any structure that has ended up on either our list of historic properties, potentially historic, not enough information to call them historic, that we get that a accredited architectural historian prepare letters, findings, adjustments to the projects, recommendations to either get in line with it, or otherwise it would be referred to ARC.
So as it stands now, is that part of the process, the stuff that comes up to us? And does that show up in our checklist anywhere?
Got it.
Just to clarify, so if a property is potentially historic, it means that it was listed in a reconnaissance survey. So it was listed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's been designated historic. It's only designated historic when it has the historic zoning. And that process requires HPC, Planning Commission, and City Council approval to rezone a property historic. So for potentially historic properties, our city code currently only requires architectural review for any changes to a potentially historic property. It does not require Historic Preservation Commission review. Only historically zoned properties require Historic Preservation Commission review. And so if you want to add something to this checklist that says, you know, the applicant shall clearly label whether this property is potentially historic or designated historic.
Or if it's on the reconnaissance
Right.
survey or whatever like that,
We can,
that is something that we can take into account for us with, if it's not going to go to the HPC, it's coming to us, that it's something that we can at least be aware of and have that information at our disposal to make a decision on that.
yeah, so it could be something that the applicant can add to the cover page of the plans, or
It could be added to the general information
right
at the beginning.
to the
General-
general information block. We
Yeah.
can add that to the,
My recommendation would be to, but we can discuss that further as the committees as well. Thank you.
I think that makes sense. I'm just curious, if we ended up getting a project with a structure that was on the historic survey, and we felt that it wasn't fully assessed given the historic significance, could we then, as ARC, go ahead and request HPC to review it? Do we have the authority to to go ahead and move it to the HPC for review?
It's not allowed by our city code currently. So only HPC review is only required for historically zoned properties. There is no provision for the ARC to refer an application to the HPC right now.
So we would just make the determination on our own that if it's on the historic survey and we think that it's historically significant, then we can say that those proposed potential changes to the structure wouldn't be consistent with what we would think would be historic and then deny it.
You could you could, so the only part where there's a discussion about the project's consistency with the secretary standards is in the environmental determination section of the staff report. And in the resolution, there's a in every resolution, there's a section that says how this project is consistent with the California Environmental Quality Act. And one of the requirements is that the project cannot have any impacts to a historic or a potentially historic resource. So in that paragraph, that's where we write whether the project is consistent with the secretary standards. And so the ARC could disagree with that paragraph or make changes to it. And if they disagree, they could either completely deny the resolution or amend it. So that's where you can do that.
And in the case that a property is potentially significant, we always require the architectural historian to weigh in on it, and that is included in the materials that are provided to you guys as well.
Right, so usually we will say that the project has been found by a qualified architectural historian to be consistent with the secretary standards. And then we will usually attach the historian's evaluation to the resolution.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. We have two members here in the chamber. The public, do you have comments that you want to make, or you want to? Well, no, we're just still we haven't come to a final resolution, but I'm opening up this section of the agenda item for public comment. So if you state your name and.
Hello, I'm Geraldine Smith Crivello. I'm the chair currently of the Historic Preservation Commission. And it's lovely to attend your meeting and be on the audience side. We usually have a different perspective, so I'm enjoying this. And we are concerned about the checklist because we're having a little trouble figuring out our role and your role if you get potentially historic properties in terms of getting an informed opinion and then being able to evaluate that and accept it or not accept it. I also noticed on page 6, packet page 67, that the comment was, and I'm looking at my phone, so it's not as clear. I mean, historically significant properties. I'm thinking, here I am an applicant, and I read this. The property reviewing architectural review may not be historic. Well, it may not, but then why aren't we saying it may be historic and this is what we need to do? I think a decision's being made in terms of the properties you evaluate, and perhaps the staff then is determining if it's historic. And maybe that happens based on the evaluation. Some evaluations, usually the applicant has a plan, and the plan, and they look for somebody who can support their plan in terms of defining the project. And so if the person that has the background and is going to say, I think it is historic, they probably wouldn't hire that person. They would probably hire somebody that supports the plan they intend on moving forward with. At least that's my opinion of it. And so where is the decision being made? Is it coming to us, in terms of defining its historic or non-historic designation? Or does it come to you and then you have to act sort of in our place? Or is it made by the staff who gives you the projects that they think are historic or non-historic? We're confused about it and wondering just what the parameters are and how the applicant might perceive them. So one of my concerns is an applicant who is interested in a project or doing something with a project, perhaps an addition, perhaps, any variety of things, may want to avoid the Historic Preservation Commission and will want to go to you first. I would like it to be kind of clear from the beginning. Is the project, in terms of potentially historic, what does that mean? And who makes the decision? And where does it go? And I think it's a little unclear. If I were an applicant, I would think, well, it looks like maybe the staff makes the decision and then maybe they decide if it goes to you. But perhaps, you may look at a report and say, more information needs to be discovered about this. And then there isn't a way for you to move, according to what I just heard Fernanda saying. You can't make that recommendation. So I think a little more thought needs to go into it so that the path is clear and for the applicant and clear for us to know that we're all doing the job we're prepared to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Good
I think
questions.
you bring up some good points. I mean, when I was bringing up the issue that I initially mentioned about the historic survey, I think that gives the city a basic set of neighborhoods and areas that at least the survey is identified as potentially being historic. The impression from what I got from Fernanda is that unless it's already been designated, so it's an H1 or H2 structure, that there is no role for HPC in the review. And that to do that would require a change in city code, which I think would actually be a good idea. I'm not sure if we make that recommendation through HPC or through ARC, but I think if there is an historic building that somebody's trying to get around the process and say, oh, well, I want to add, I know this building's historic and I'm going to go ahead and make modifications to it that would change its historic presence, that we couldn't, it would be a way of getting around it. And so the ability for the ARC to be able to go ahead and move a project that may have that potential issue to HPC would be a valuable tool. Or being able to have staff say, well, this is on the historic register. If you're going to make changes to it, it should go to HPC first and then go to ARC later. So I think HPC that's the purpose of HPC, is to be able to identify and protect historic structures in Monterey. So I would then throw it back at Fernanda. I mean, I think that's a worthwhile approach to take. How do we move your concern forward in terms of mechanism that can then allow a resolution of it?
Yes, so I mean, this is a good discussion, but it would have to be agendized because a city code amendment was not proposed for today's meeting. So I mean, we're just looking at the submittal checklist, and so if someone wants to amend the city code to have the HPC review potentially historic properties, that would, I would welcome a letter directed to the community development director making that request.
There you go.
Well, I appreciate the discussion, and I think it's good to perhaps think about it. Perhaps, you know, the potentially historic question is who makes that decision, and the yes or no, or maybe, you know, in between. Some of them are very easy. Yes, it's historic, so we know what to do, or no, it definitely isn't. But that middle ground, I think, needs to be discussed a little more. And along with a neighborhood historic reconnaissance plan, what that means. I think all of these are points that should be clear, I think, for the public, as well as for our two commissions, and as we evaluate the properties.
Okay.
I think it would help us a lot to know, and we do have that concern of having a little extra protection for potentially historic properties. And some of them move through us and move on and have different outcomes through planning and the city council. We're part of a process that we don't control completely, but at least we're one more layer of concern and a few more eyes looking at the project and considering it in terms of historic impact.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, I see Zoe, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question or comment?
I do. I'm curious if city staff can tell us how many of these homes we've had or projects we've had this year, ballpark it, that would need both HPC and ARC approval, or need to go through both of our committees.
So I can answer that. Projects that it would be zero have gone to both this year. It's one or the other, as Fernanda was talking about earlier, as it's codified by the city code. And I wanted to make one note on the checklist related. I didn't include it in the presentation because there hasn't been a code amendment that would necessitate require an update to that portion of the checklist, but there is a summary on page 2 of the architecture review handout that talks about historically significant properties and potentially historic properties and the process that they go through, at least as it's codified now with city code. I understand there may be future discussions about what we do. But yeah, I wanted to put those 2 points out there.
Right.
I just wanted to get sort of an understanding of how many projects, if we changed all of this, how many projects that would affect over the year.
Good question. Yeah, usually it's a little clear, I think, but it's the ones in the middle that have potential either way that we may need an extra look at. And I'd be glad to, and I know others on the Historic Preservation Commission would be glad to kind of meet in with staff or with you to see how we could come up with language that would make the process clearer for the public as well as for ourselves.
I mean, is staff also able to give me a kind of ballpark answer of what they think it would be, number of properties wise?
So I think the best way that we could find that out is looking at the number of projects that have gone through ARC that required a determination with an architectural historian, because the only reason that an architectural historian would have been included in the process is if it was potentially historic.
Right. Yeah, just in the past, several months, I know there was one project that we had, it came to us a couple of times, that was over in Old Town.
Yeah.
Making with that was actually a question that was a question on the survey or in the documentation of the information, that it was a potentially historic site. So, I mean, in the last 3 months, I know that we've had one at least.
So maybe like a handful?
Yeah,
5?
yeah, like a handful. I mean, 601 Lighthouse, 632 West Franklin, 351 Watson. There might be 2 more.
Okay, thank you.
I know there's one we're interested in that's coming up, and so we're concerned because storyboards are up there. They're attached to the dwelling that we think is historic, and we were initially told they were making two outbuildings, sort of, I don't know, a smaller unit and something else. I don't know but yet it looks like the storyboard lines are connected to the main house. So we're just concerned to have criteria that's easily understood by everybody. And some projects may come to you if not in the past. We think there's one coming up.
Right. No, I understand. One thing I'm a little hesitant to move forward, talking about a project that may come up here without us
I know.
having the input and the other people, the applicant, et cetera, being here to comment on it as well. But in general, I think it's good for us to have the background. Is it potentially historic? Is it on the reconnaissance survey or not? That even if it isn't something that, without changing or amending the city code, for us to have that as information to take into account for when we take the decision if we should approve this or not. At least until in my opinion, that until the city code is codified or amended, to do that. And I think in general, that's a good idea. And I would certainly support that. But at least that we have the ability to say, okay, this is something that we can legitimately have at our disposal to help us make our decision.
Thank you for considering.
Okay,
these items.
thank you. Anything else?
I'll just second the chair's summary. I think that makes a lot of sense. We should just know what we're dealing with, and any historic preservation suggestions or recommendations, they've had time to review and make them to the board.
Yeah, hi, I'm Carol Dawson. I'm also a member of HPC. The property that Geraldine is referring to is a J.C. Anthony. I'm a proud owner of a J.C. Anthony home, as is Bob. This is a J.C. Anthony home in my neighborhood that was built in 1926, and there have been no changes at all made to this house. It's completely intact. There's wallpaper in the upstairs bathroom that's 100 years old almost. And this house has been deemed to be potentially historic on our Alta Mesa reconnaissance survey, but it hasn't. There's no Mills Act. It's not actually been designated as historic. And so the way the rules are now, they've got story poles up, and the story poles they're attached to the house, and it appears that these are significant changes that they want to make to this home, to the Mesa Road side, and then also the other side, which I believe is the main entrance to the home. And the way the rules are now, that this could come just right to ARC without even going to HBC. And this particular home, being a completely intact J.C. Anthony home from 1926, I think that should go to HBC. Anyway, so my 2 cents.
Any other questions, comments,
I have
or?
a question for staff. And this, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but what exactly is the definition of how something gets deemed historic? Is it just age? Is it the significance of the building, of the architect, of who lived in it? And would that mean, if it is age, that every year, a bunch of new houses get designated as historic?
So there are 4 ways that a property can be designated historic. One is if the person that lived there or the property is associated with the life of an important person. The second is if the property has is architecturally significant, or the method of construction is significant. The third is if if the property is tied to events that have made a historic contribution to either the local, state, or national history. And the fourth if the property contains information such as archaeological resources or paleontological resources that contribute to information, like historic information. And those are the 4 criteria that the HPC considers when they,
So
Be-
age is not one of them.
Under,
not under those 4 criteria, but there is a National Preservation Historic Bulletin that recommends looking at properties that are 50 years of age or older.
60.
50. So when a property hits 50 years of age or older, we take a closer look to see if it could qualify to be historic under those 4, one of those 4 criteria.
and so every application that comes through as standard, we look at the age of the property of when it was built and go from there.
So
as
for
well.
instance, 601 Lighthouse was over 60 years old. So it automatically gets looked at. And it was planning that wanted the historian to, they wanted them to hire as a historian. Didn't it go back to planning?
The planning required a historian's evaluation as
On
part
that,
of,
okay.
as part of the application.
Got it.
Any other questions, comments, motion or discussion on this?
I think as far as our checklist goes, I would, move to approve that. I mean, it sounds like there's a much longer discussion about the HPC that needs to happen as well. But that doesn't really affect getting item 4 approved in my mind.
So are you,
So
Put it
I
forth the
I will move to approve the updates to the architectural review submittal checklist public handout. That's item number 4 on today's agenda.
I'll go ahead and second.
all right, motion has been made to approve the architectural review submittal checklist for public handout. So, Erica, would you do a roll call vote for us, please?
Sure. Chair Hunter,
I'll go aye.
Vice Chair Tregenza,
Aye.
Committee Member Bluth,
Aye.
Committee Member Carter,
Aye.
Committee Member Ostavar.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries with a vote of 4.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments for discussion or report from staff?
I have a question,
Oh, okay.
not related to ARC, but do you know if people who are applying for the open council seat, if those applications are going to be posted publicly or where we can find those?
They're definitely on the website, but I can get you the right link if
Okay,
if that helps.
thank you.
Okay. So there will be a new California building code that will take effect in the new year. So that's just, something to know. We were operating under the 2019 California Building Code, but starting next year, projects will need to conform to the 2022 California Building Code. So I'm not super familiar with the new code, but there are more requirements for energy efficiency. I think that's the biggest change. And then the planning on the November 8th Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission considered adopting objective design standards for the downtown and lighthouse specific plans. And those, because of the new state housing laws that streamline certain housing projects, some of these housing projects do not need any discretionary, are not required to go through any discretionary review. So they would just go straight to the building department for a building permit. But the only way that we can retain some design control is if we adopt objective design standards. And so the projects would need to be consistent with these standards. And we've prepared them for the downtown and lighthouse specific plan so far. And we will be preparing them for the North Fremont specific plan as well. But at that meeting, the planning commission decided to continue the item to the December 13th meeting because they wanted to consider some public comments that were raised regarding the standards. And then for the next ARC meeting on December 7th, we have two tentatively scheduled items. We have the signs checklist scheduled so that you get a chance to review those. And there's a potential project at 2333 North Fremont Street to add 2 residential units to that site. But however, we don't know if this will be scheduled to that meeting yet. We're still reviewing the project.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. So as we get ready to adjourn, I wish everyone a very happy holiday season and a safe one at that. Okay, so at 5:30, I'll go ahead and adjourn meeting.
Thank you.